can't make people do that. I mean, you know, it goes.
You can make people do that, but
you can cultivate a culture for it.
Discuss whether or not they think that has anything to do with the larger issues that you're discussing right now.
I think it does.
I definitely think it does. But I also know, and this is like my perspective from being here since 1980, when I came, there was very little activity, and now there's a whole lot more than there was. That's an organic process. I mean, I remember that they tried to take row houses and replicate it here, and there was just no way that was ever going to work because, you know, row houses grew organically out of what Ricky wanted to do with some other artists in that particular neighborhood. And I think that has to happen as an organic thing. You can't sort of, because frankly, I taught at Booker T a long time ago, and I had some of the most unbelievably creative and talented young people who left and they did not come back. And it's a shame because if that energy stayed here, I mean, you know, maybe went away to college and then came back, you know, we would have so much going on that we don't, because they didn't feel that they could stay here because there was nothing for them to do.
One of the things, so, can I respond and then I guess Wanda, right?
Well, I was going to say quickly,
Okay. Yeah.
quickly, the studio visits that I have my students do, I do that to show them that they can make it in Dallas. We go see Sean Springer, we go see Gary Buckner, we go see Team Better Block. I show them these people and what they're doing, and they talk to my students so they can see I can be an entrepreneur like these guys, and that's why I do it.
Kristen? Well, I was just going to say it waxes and wanes. I mean, it's not as strong right now. I'm sure it probably has something to do with the economy. When I first came here in '04, well, there were many things going on. There was a very strong avant-garde. There was a little collective called OH6 out of UTD. I was teaching at SMU. And it was amazing. And some of those artists are still here. It'd be great if these artists stayed around, but they need to go. And that's okay, and they come back. But you can't stay in Dallas forever if you haven't left yet. That's part of the problem. People need to go and then come back. You have to get away from Texas sometime in your life. It's like I'm from Tennessee. If I had stayed there my whole life, I would, well, I don't want to tell you what I would.
When I was,
I guess I feel that way about every place. I mean, I couldn't wait to get out of Philly.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, and I never went back.
Yeah.
I mean, I've moved around all over the world, basically, but I have no desire to go back to Philadelphia.
when I was,
Because I think
There's a
here is a
question in
place
the
where
back.
things can happen.
There's 2 questions in the
Not
back.
so much in Philly.
On your question about guerrilla arts or finding alternative space to pull off these art projects, my question to you is, how do you address it to the students? How do you address it to other artists? That sometimes our interventions in these spaces, 1, are not necessarily welcome, or 2, are not necessarily relevant to the communities that we're going into. How do you teach these artists to be responsible and accountable to the communities they're going into? I'm currently working with Dallas, and I'm seeing a whole bunch of people coming in and trying to set up theaters, trying to set up music venues, trying to set up art galleries without any consideration that there's already a community there and there's already a culture there. How do you address that?
well, when I first got here to UTA, I was teaching a professional, actually it was a museum practices course and then a professional practice course, and my classes at that time were somewhere anywhere between 10 and 15 people. And part of the course was to actually jury or curate a show of UTA art students, but they would have to find the class, and the class could not participate in the show itself. They only organized it, but they had to go find a space somewhere in the metroplex. It could be anywhere. They had to organize. They had to figure out how to curate or jury the show. They had to do a reception. They had to do invitations. They had to do the installation, the de-installation, do everything. Because I think that one of the things we're talking about too is that artists are a part of this and they are responsible to their own careers. I came up from, when I was a student, one of the questions that I had is after I made several works is like, well, what do you do with the work now? And for me, it was like I started organizing shows, not realizing that I was being a curator. was in that, I didn't even realize that until somebody offered me money about 15 years later. And then I realized, oh, I can make some money off that. But I think it's important for the artists to be able to have the tools and the skills to know that they themselves could take action and know how to do this themselves. And I think that's what is needed, so that they are given those skill sets, so that they can, instead of waiting for a gallery or the museum or somebody else to do something for them, they could do it for themselves. And I'm a strong believer.
To follow up on that is, what's occurring with that model is that they're simply replicating what museums and galleries are doing. And for a lot of minorities, the reason they don't show up in these spaces is not simply because they can't, because it doesn't belong to them. It's not of them. It's something that hasn't been brought to us, right? So even if you go out and set up a gallery, let's say in a warehouse, anywhere, that community is not in touch with that kind of practice anyway. How do you address the immediate concerns or interests of that community first before you even start kind of setting up these?
You bring up a really good point, and it's a point that I have had sort of a bone of contention with the Academy, and a long history of what the Academy has done, and that is that the idea that you can drop into a community and do things that are, really exciting, but exciting to whom? And the way in which you engage community is not really taught necessarily in schools. I mean, there's a lot of encouragement to get outside the walls of the Academy, but they're not necessarily the kinds of strategies being taught to students who want to do that as to what's the most effective way to engage community. And I wish there were more, ways in interjecting that into the...
Right.
It's not something that's...
Yes, you can
Yes,
teach
you
it.
can.
I disagree very much. You definitely can teach it.
Talk about organic crossover. You can't teach crossover.
No, you can't teach crossover, but you can teach people certain skills that they may need in order to know how you begin to...
That's teaching manners. Has nothing to do with art.
Well, I didn't say it had to do with art. The way I get engaged in community has nothing to do with art. It's about community development.
Any other questions?
I think Liliana has, let's do one last question with Liliana, and we'll take the fisticuffs out to the street. I'm just kidding.
To that question, because I do
Brown does it well.
community practice a lot.
Everybody, if you could focus your attention on the speaker.
No, so I'm saying that, I don't believe it's something that can be taught, the discussion can happen. If I think about the trajectory of my work and going into certain communities and working, and I'm going and I'm thinking I'm doing this grand gesture, it took that actual action for me to learn, like, oh, wait a minute, I'm not doing this grand gesture. Actually, they don't need me to set the film to right here in the middle of this flea market. And it became a sort of a learning curve for me to then informed my future work. But in going back to grad school, the discussion didn't actually happen about what happens when you're doing this sort of work. So it's not something that can be taught, but it's a discussion that does happen.
But the results there, you can't turn something into a formula so you can estimate the results of interactions. For instance, like guys next door to me cook barbecue and random hours with dogs. I would assume that this is some kind of invasive artistic gesture, and am I assuming that they are coming from a program that deifies the DNA? I'm assuming that like all minorities need to have a show with it. This is directed at you, because I don't agree with your position at all. The difference between Houston and Dallas is Houston saw what Chris referred to as the dying capital a long time before we did. And you don't have to go broke to make art. It's bullshit. And what you guys are talking about, the crossovers happen, and you don't need the debt economy, probably the economy has been in for a long time. And it's not about like finding new material. Well, when this shit hits the slammer, we're all going to have paint with Twixie sticks. Whatever. It's not really about that.
Liliana.
These things aren't.
Thanks. Liliana?
Well, I just wanted to talk about the race issue and the diversity. I don't see that happening. This is one of the most segregated countries that I have seen. There's a zone and a museum for every race. And then I don't see the overlapping either, because when you see the quotas that they have to fill in universities, other cities.
Okay, thank you on that upbeat note. We'll call it the seg. No. Second thing.
I have two questions, I don't know if they're related. I apologize for getting nervous talking. But I wanted to know, so with each of you guys' organizations, institutions that you're working with, what were some of the things or people, artist practice that you have seen that are radical and regional or whatever you want to call it. But also separate from that, I just have sort of a separate comment in the fact that I just feel in general, outside of the discussion of race, feminism, whatever, I feel in general that art community, and this is not specific to Dallas, but the art community in general just gives too much power to the institution overall. And so the idea that somebody's flying to Berlin to look at whatever, that's a lifestyle. Like I would fly to Berlin if I had money to. To be honest, it's a lifestyle, but that's not something necessarily that I would want to critique. Where I do find that Dallas is maybe lacking, why it's not in LA or New York yet, is that there's, to me, the supportive arts that comes from, say, municipalities or nonprofit isn't the same, isn't as robust in the sense of giving to individual artists projects so that, these works can be created. Am I making sense right now? I would agree. So for instance, if there's not an active art commission that supports individual artists in Dallas,
that's a problem.
An institution, and then the institution spreads the wealth and what little there is to spread. To me, that's a problem in Dallas, and I think as citizens, the arts community has to be responsible for making sure that's balanced and checking that. So I'm wondering, I just moved here a couple of years ago, has there been a movement to sort of address that? And that, we can't address the collectors going to Berlin to collect the artists, but we can say what's being done with our taxpayer money to support our community.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that one of the things that I miss the most about New York is NYFA, which not only gave me a grant, but has continued to send me emails every single week about everything going on, has kept my work up on their website, has filled in so many gaps and holes for me as an artist in the community since I'm so far away from it. And I think that, it's a nonprofit organization that gets a lot of funding from the state government, but it also has, as a nonprofit, it has a board of directors, it has, events to raise money. And I think that's something that Dallas and a lot of cities and municipalities in America would really benefit from, as an organization like that.